Welcome to SimpleMD. I'm your host, Dr. Ariel Soffer. Our goal here at SimpleMD is to take all of the medical information that's swirling around the internet and make it more simple, make it enjoyable in a conversation. We're going to take your questions, we're going to bring in expert guests, and we're going to have a great time. So please join us and subscribe below. Welcome everybody to SimpleMD. I'm your host, Ariel Soffer. I'm a cardiologist that spends a lot of his time trying to explain to my patients and my friends what's out there in medical knowledge and what is important to our everyday lives, and sort of demystify, declutter, and make it more simple. So that's the goal. We're going to have a great conversation with one of my greatest friends, Richie, who is great at asking me questions and helping you out there as well as himself figure out what is more important and what is the truth versus really the fiction in the medical knowledge that we're all trying to discern. So with that, welcome.
Thanks, Ar.
And let's discuss some things that we're seeing in the web today. One of my favorite websites for everybody is really the WebMD website. Why? Because it's doing what we're trying to do, which is taking a lot of the information, breaking it down and making it easy to understand. And so we use that website a lot to tell our patients to go to tell my friends to go to if they have something they want to break down. But it could even be improved upon a bit in a roundtable discussion. So that's kind of what we're going to sort of start out today with.
I have a question for you. Okay.
Waste no time.
I actually called you yesterday. You didn't pick up. So I actually did go to the website.
Well, I have you blocked.
So, as you know, I'm starting to eat healthier now. I want to exercise, work out a little bit. I come home from work after sitting all day. I go for a short walk. My legs, I know I'm not in shape, but my legs felt extremely heavy to me. And I felt like that a little bit when I'm sleeping sometimes. Just had a question. Is that just non-use, not sitting down all day? What causes that?
It's a good question, man. Most of the time it's caused by one specific thing. So we've heard of things like restless leg. We've heard of people have arthritis. People have musculoskeletal issues. Most of the time it's actually caused by your veins. Okay. So your veins are 180 degrees of 360 degrees of circulation. So like you often try and get me to do, you say, all right, give it to me in 60 seconds, right? What was your term?
Give me veins in 60 seconds.
Okay, very, very
It wasn't
clever.
anything original. But so as a cardiologist, tell me your description of veins in 60 seconds, and then we'll get to some concerns about it.
Great. So 360 degrees of circulation is like a train that kind of is running around your body, delivering oxygen to your tissues, and then once your tissues use it, it takes it back to the lungs, and it does it all over again every, roughly 60 times in a minute. So that part of the body, which is the venous circulation, is not as well understood to a lot of people as the arterial circulation, which is the bright red blood. Well, there's a dark blood called venous circulation, and what happens is it's taking all the waste products from those tissues that have just used them, and when you stand up or you sit down like we're doing for a period of time, gravity pulls that stuff down, just pulls it down, and that is the venous circulation. When that breaks, when there's a break in that movement towards the heart, that is a problem called venous insufficiency, or the venous system isn't working so well. And that, my friend, I think is what's going on with you, and that's in 60 seconds, the beginning of our discussion.
Not bad. Okay, so what can I do about it? What can I do about it during the day? Because I'm sitting down all day at a desk. So what do you do all day?
Right. So it's not an easy thing. So between the pandemic and even before the pandemic, we're all sitting at desks more frequently. We're not moving our legs as much. We have this thing called the second heart, which is, people don't realize, it's called the calf. So the calf is actually the second heart, and it's got to be squeezing, right? So it's got to be pushing blood like an ice cream cone from the sort of bottom all the way towards the top, against gravity, through all of your tissues, into your lungs, where you take a deep breath and you reoxygenate it, and it becomes arterial blood. So that ice cream cone works really great when you're a kid. It probably works pretty well in your 20s. But as we get older, it doesn't. Those ice cream cone movements emanating from the calf doesn't work as well.
So the arteries are moving blood from the heart to the rest of the body. The veins are bringing it back to the heart.
Yes.
And if as we get older, if the veins aren't working properly, this is what can cause those feelings?
Right. So you got these little valves. Imagine like you're pumping blood through a chamber, but it's pumping. It's not continuous. So as it pumps forward, it has to stay in that chamber. Mm-hmm. You know, remember you go to like Disney World and you move through those little sort of areas, and then the doors close behind you and you go forward. Well, the doors have to close, and those are called valves. And those valves are the consistency of your hair and the size of your fingernail. And when those open and close, it's all great. The blood stays in the chamber and it moves towards the heart, right, through gravity. However, if those valves ever break loose or break just a little bit, that's called venous insufficiency, and that starts to move the wrong direction. It starts to leak back, and then that blood has to re-enter the chamber, and the whole thing starts to sort of put pressure there. So that's the essence of what happens with us as we grow older. It happens sometimes faster in people that have a genetic propensity towards it, women that have a bunch of children and put pressure on it, people that don't move their calves enough during the day and the blood just is sticking around. The calves help it. So when the doors open, when those valves open, it pushes through. The calves push it through. But if you don't move your calves, if you're stuck at a desk, if you're in positions, let's say, stewardesses on airlines have a terrible problem with it because they're sitting sort of in jump seats a lot, and they don't have the ability to move around. Teachers, restaurant workers, the list goes on of professions that don't get to move their calves enough. So when you lose that piece, there's a problem. The nice thing is there's some fixes for that. So compression socks are given standard by the airlines right now because they keep that blood flowing. And we're starting to see that more in other professions as well.
Does the fact that I'm exercising now work? Does that help it? Or does that help venous insufficiency at all, exercising?
No, it doesn't help it at all. In fact, the exercise is the time you don't need, say, a compression sock, because your body is now working because your calves are working. So that moment, not really. If you were to say, I'm exercising every moment of the day, that would be different. But, you probably do, 45 minutes, an hour and a half of exercise. That's great. What are you doing the rest of the time? Are you sitting at a desk and are your legs not moving? If they are moving up and down, if they're moving their calves, if you consider that exercise, that's great to stop venous insufficiency. They even make these little tilt boards, which is basically like a seesaw, and you put your legs on it and you move it. Those are great for when you're sitting down. If you're standing up, sort of small movements of your calf can be helpful, or walking around a bit more. The idea that these tiny little valves can be fixed by anything is not really likely. Once they break, we have to help it out. So things like compression socks are very important.
And compression socks you would wear every day? Recommend?
Well, I'll tell you when you don't wear them. You don't have to wear them at night, because when you're laying flat, valves don't really matter because blood is not going against gravity. You don't have to wear it when you're exercising. So the sort of
so when I'm laying at night though, and you have that restless leg, is that venous insufficiency? Most
of the time it is. There are some other forms of restless leg that have to do with nerve damage, but those are actually rare. The more common form of restless legs comes from lactic acid that's being built up, and all the waste products of the blood, of this venous blood, that's supposed to be going towards your lungs and being reoxygenated and cleaned up through the system, sitting in and around your leg, causing you uncomfortability, as you imagine if anybody had waste products around their knees, their ankles, their feet.
So does being a little bit more active before going to sleep, an hour or two before going to sleep, does that help with that restless leg? I understand it's not curing venous insufficiency, the cause of it, but is that helping by getting your blood flowing more at all?
Good question, but no. what really helps you at that moment is to raise it when you go to bed, raise your legs above the level of your heart, helps to drain everything. The exercise, again, if you're exercising throughout the day, if you're not allowing it to accumulate, you're better off. But I'm not saying there are many, many benefits of exercising, and I recommend it, interval, what I call interval training. So, you can bring your heart rate up and down. I think that's great. I don't recommend it, for at least an hour before you go to sleep, because then we'll talk about that some other time, but all the methods of how to sleep better. You don't want to exercise in any form, I think, for about an hour before you want to go to sleep. So that isn't maybe the easiest thing to do. But elevating, that's where the lazy boy came from. The lazy boy chair basically came from people going, you know what, I need to kick my legs up at the end of the day. That's because the body hasn't cleared everything. You put the lazy boy on, you kick back, and now your legs are naturally higher, hopefully, at the level of your heart or better. Everything starts draining in, you feel better, and you go to sleep easier.
So compression socks help the issue. They don't solve the issue. How do you solve the issue?
Well, one thing would be to live on the moon with no gravity whatsoever. It's kind of funny, but actually a colleague of mine studied that in one of the space shuttles, a cardiologist that actually cathed himself in space to see the effects of lack of gravity on the legs. But aside from that, there are treatments that we can help with those valves, and they involve lasers and certain chemical ablations that we sort of rerouting the blood, if you will, to working valves. We have a bunch of redundant or extra areas that the body can use, and so there's a lot of treatments, definitive treatments for this as well.
What are we talking? What part of the population has this?
Huge. Like I've heard it as much as 40% of the entire population over the age of 20 or so. So that's a big amount. And the question is like, why? Like, how is this like an epidemic? That would be considered an epidemic. And I think the answer is we're just living longer. We're sitting more or a little more sedentary during the day. We're not sort of hunting and gathering all day, and we are living longer on top of which. So there is this theory that, sort of evolutionarily, we were sort of on all fours, and we weren't really combating gravity where we are today, which is we're standing straight up, and there's a lot of blood that has to go from the tip of the toes all the way up. And the Achilles heel of the circulatory system seems to be these little valves that are, again, size of a fingernail, consistency of hair. And when a little thing happens, a little trauma, a little more, sort of blood in there for a period of time, they break, and that's the evolutionarily, that's how we can explain why so many people have this problem.
Why, other than the restless leg, other than the heavy leg, why should we be concerned with venous insufficiency? What can it ultimately, is there anything in the long term to be concerned about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the worst part of venous insufficiency, meaning the sort of, I say the word lactic acid, not just lactic acid, all the waste products of the body and the venous part of the circulation sitting around your legs, and your legs as opposed to your arms, because your legs are on the bottom part of your body, right? So they have more of an effect of gravity. They've got more sort of anatomy to go through to get back to the heart. So the legs are usually the ones in trouble, and the reason that it's there is debatable. We talk about the evolution, but it is there. So treat them with compression is one of the things that we talk about as a first step. The second step is going to be other forms of intervention to sort of use valves in the body that are working. But if all else fails and you don't treat them, the dreaded result is the ulcer. So this non-healing or difficult to heal ulcer can happen where if you just have a little bit of an abrasion, it could be a bad mosquito bite, it could be you walk by a coffee table, it could just actually break open itself from the pressure. And that's called a venous ulcer. And man, those venous leg ulcers, we call them VLUs, are very difficult. They're very complicated. They're very costly.
It's an opening in your skin?
Opening in the skin, yeah, right around the ankles. right around the ankles, and it's super difficult. And we see them in a lot of people that have venous insufficiency for a period of time, not just old people. It can have just be people that just don't have great. The skin starts to change color. You'll see, you go to the beach and you'll see people with changing color of skin, from the bottom third of the leg on down. Those are people that usually have venous insufficiency, and the venous leg ulcer is that end result, and that can be very, very problematic, even potentially deadly, because you can get an infection there. It can become septic, or you can get cellulitis. There's a lot of bad things that can happen there. So that's the end result of that tiny little spider vein that you see that just, if something's coming underneath, and usually it is, in the form of venous insufficiency, that's the end result of it.
So when you see spider veins, that means something to you. It's not just a cosmetic issue. It's something underlying.
Yes. Usually there is a reason underneath. There can be just an innocent spider vein. But usually when you see spider veins and the varicose veins that are underneath them, often it usually signifies an underlying problem.
So the compression socks have the ability to slow down the progress of venous insufficiency that you're saying possibly 40% of the population in the United States has.
Yeah, compression socks are one of our key components, and they've been used for generations, right? So,
do you wear them?
I'm wearing them right now, man. I have a form on right now. I wear them all the time that I can. Like, listen, if I'm going to the beach, I don't wear them. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to be laying down, I don't need to wear them. But in days where I'm in long procedures, or I'm in the office a lot, or I'm not able to use my calf as much, they are helpful. And there are different types. You can get them like 15 to 20 millimeters of mercury, so the type of pressure that's there. You can get them a little heavier, 20 to 30. They come in all sorts of styles, and I don't usually wear them above my knee, because I don't think it helps quite as much. So I wear them to the knee, and they're just better than weighing. Listen, if you wear a sock that doesn't, and just think about it for a second. So mine are compression, so they're tighter at the bottom and they're more loose at the top, right? Mm-hmm. So as I walk or even stand there, they're trying to push blood north. If they're not compression, if they're regular socks, it could actually do the opposite. It could hold blood by being tighter at the top.
So a regular sock
could actually be a tourniquet.
Okay.
And often is. And I imagine you or other people have noticed, I know I've got this from lots of my patients through the years, but they often say, I pull my socks off and I got this huge imprint.
Yeah.
That's not normal. That means that there's sort of blood flow, that there's blood products sitting there. It's swelling. It's a form of swelling. It shouldn't happen. It means those socks are bad. And maybe there's a little venous insufficiency underneath.
So it means the socks are bad. It doesn't necessarily mean you have venous insufficiency.
Well, right. It could mean bad socks. It could mean venous insufficiency. It could mean both.
I think I know the answer, but does diet help at all with venous insufficiency? Or is it too late?
Yeah, not really. Let me put it this way. So high salt intake, if you take more salt that your kidneys can handle, which is not easy. Most kidneys can handle salt, but there is enough salt in our unknown salt in our diet that maybe it's more than our kidneys can really handle, then it can worsen venous insufficiency, because all of the blood goes under pressure, because there's more blood than there should be in the circulation, essentially. So with the exception of that, it's not really a dietary issue, venous insufficiency.
Do you have anything else to say about venous insufficiency? I'd like to get to.
Have you ever seen me with not more to say? We keep on going, but no, I just want to answer your questions and our listeners' questions.
Only because I brought up the diet, and it's kind of on the top of my mind right now, because I have this kind of renewed vigor to try to get in shape and exercise a little bit. I was thinking plant-based. I was thinking Mediterranean. I know you've talked about Mediterranean and written about it. So I'm going to give you another 60-second exercise here.
Okay.
Tell us about the Mediterranean diet in 60 seconds. And you set the clock.
All right, 60 seconds on the Mediterranean diet. Well, it's a good thing. So the Mediterranean diet really started to be looked at years ago, so within the last 30 years, whereby they found out the people in the particular Mediterranean areas, so this included everything from sort of, Greece, Italy, that entire sort of southern Mediterranean European area, we found that people were doing actually better from a cardiovascular perspective, a little less heart disease, better cholesterol numbers, a little less stroke, that sort of a thing. So people started looking at it. The first big study was a Lion study, then went to the Predimed study, and these studies looked at thousands and thousands of people and said, why is it that they seem to be doing better? And they found, number one, they were doing a little bit better, so they had a better longevity, they had less strokes, less heart attacks, less of the circulatory problems. And they identified at the end of the day that they follow basically a pyramid that's a bit different than the Western pyramid was at the time, and maybe still is, where the basis of the pyramid is fruits and vegetables. On top of that came sort of legumes, so the beans and the chickpeas, and then on top of that would be a little bit of the dairies and the cheeses, and maybe the lean meats, like a bit more on the fish orientation and the leaner meats. On top of that came, a bit of red meat, so a bit was there, and at the very top a little bit of desserts. Their desserts tended to be more along the lines of the fruits. All of that, with the fat source being extra virgin olive oil, and not the butters and the margarines. And we can talk about some of the nuts and things like that. So that's the crux of the Mediterranean diet, and there's a lot more to discuss in it. But it's the number one diet recommended by the American Heart Association, American Medical Association, every association, because it's something that we can also live with, as opposed to some of the more restrictive and or fad diets.
Why is it so supported compared to the other diets?
Well, I think it's because the data is pretty rich on it, and the end result is there. So we found a group of people that were living a little better, and I say better than longer because the longer is part of it, but also better, meaning less comorbidities, less stroke, heart attacks, and debilitating things. They seem to throw in a little red wine.
Tell us about comorbidity.
Comorbidity. So comorbidity, I think everybody got to know that a bit with the pandemic, so meaning other diseases. That's really the definition. So other associated diseases.
Because as you know, I'm going through this kind of interest in the plant-based diet versus a diet with Mediterranean-based diet. Tell me some of the foods that you would recommend for the audience if they wanted to kind of introduce themselves to the Mediterranean diet.
Well, the idea is really to just be a bit thoughtful during your day. So if you're going to base your pyramid on fruits and vegetables, adding those things as opposed to, using the fast food and the processed things, that's simple change alone. Stay away from processed stuff. Try and make sure that you've got your fruits and vegetables on your, 3 to 4 plus servings a day. Start out breakfast like that. Consider, adding avocados into what would be your normal regimen. Sort of stay away from, the bacon and the sausages and the red meats in breakfast, and work your way from there. There's a lot of great, literature on WebMD and other, sites that give you recipes and give you ways of sort of jump starting this a little bit. So I don't know that we want to spend a whole lot of time on that in this particular discussion, but I think if you make that initial mindset that you're not restricting yourself completely, you're not going on a fad diet, you're not trying to be, I'm not saying that a paleo or any of these diets are fads, but they are relatively new. You're talking about something that is older and that allows you to eat everything that we can find at our stores now, just making sort of better choices. And a lifestyle. And by the way, you're allowed to add on a little bit of wine. It appears that the Mediterranean folks are, okay with a glass or two of red wine per day. You lose that benefit when you start, tripling that, and you don't have as much benefit if you have none of that. So, a little bit of moderation goes a long way, and the Mediterranean diet we feel is maybe the most moderate way of living.
I think that's in line with your philosophy. We've talked about it. Restrictive diets just don't seem to work in the long term. And I think you feel the Mediterranean diet is something that everything's in moderation. It's something that you can make a lifestyle, more so than some of the other diets that are out there.
Sure. I mean, moderation has to also have an asterisk by it. So if you say, listen, I want to sort of, moderately, take steak knives and poke my eye, there's no moderation there, right? You don't do that. Similarly with diets, like, you're not going to live too well, no matter what you do. If you're, say, I'm going to moderately have, 3 Krispy Kremes a day. There's certain things you want to avoid, period. But by saying that you are comfortable with going to a supermarket and being able to buy along this Mediterranean platform, you can do it. You can also do it with you've been looking at a sort of just plant-based, sort of vegan type diets, which is fine. I think that may even be more beneficial in terms of reduction of heart attack and stroke and so forth than pure Mediterranean. Mediterranean has a bit of veganism in it, but you're going to go out to dinner and someone's going to, maybe offer you, sort of a wonderful piece of salmon, or a nice, lean, chicken breast. How do
Hopefully it's the waiter.
Otherwise, it'd be a little odd. Just went from another table. Can't buy it. Listen. But at the end of the day,
I just want to ask you, as a cardiologist, because we talked about the Krispy Kreme donuts, obviously, and then you have, but you did mention foods in the Mediterranean diet that have fat in them, such as the avocado, the nuts, olive oil. What do you? And at this point, we've heard a lot about good fat and bad fat. But what, as a cardiologist, what does that mean? What do you see inside somebody's?
Let's. I want to orient our audience. If they happen to be, there's a great discussion on WebMD called which has more saturated fat. Right, saturated fat's a problem. Saturated fat basically turns hard at room temperature. Imagine what that's doing in your body. So, lard, butter, coconut oil, that really can't be good for you at any significant, quantity. It can also raise your bad cholesterol, your LDL, which is also a real big problem.
So that measurement of the LDL is a function of our diet?
A portion of it. A portion of it's genetic because we have receptors that allow it to be in the part of your blood that we're measuring. We're not measuring all of the cholesterol. We're measuring what's in your bloodstream. So if you have bad receptors, right, you're going to have more in your bloodstream. Not good because then they go into plaques. So you want to be careful with the saturated fat. You want to keep a very low, probably about 5% of your diet in saturated fat, which means avoiding foods that have a lot of it in it.
Okay, so you're talking about avoiding food, but short of medication, can you lower your bad cholesterol without medication?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
The best studies have shown about 10 to 15% with a good diet lower in saturated fat. That doesn't mean if you've got a 300 LDL, what's 10 or 15% of that? That's 30 points. You want to get under pretty much 100. The magic 100. Number is about 100, yeah. And LDL, bad cholesterol, of about under 100 is a baseline optimal. And if you've got other comorbidities, like we discussed before, other cardiac risk factors, you may want it much lower than that. So that usually can't be accomplished only by diet. But if your number is 120, yeah, you could definitely lower it. And there are, there's this. Let me take this thing on WebMD, which is more saturated fat, which you showed me earlier, and maybe you want to run through that. There were some good questions there, like which has more saturated fat, ice cream or Greek yogurt, for instance, right?
Yeah.
Which do you think?
Which has more saturated fat? I'm going to say ice cream.
So you are actually incorrect, right? So Greek yogurt actually may have a little more saturated fat. Now, there are types of low-fat or non-fat Greek yogurts, but in and of itself, particularly based on typical serving sizes, you can actually get more saturated fat from a Greek yogurt. Again, we don't want to avoid completely saturated fat. You can have just a little bit, but it's got to be 5% of your day. Who wants to count their daily amount? Just avoid the things that have more of it in it and make those little choices, like a non-fat Greek yogurt would be better for you, or a low-fat Greek yogurt would be better for you than a regular Greek yogurt, as a for instance.
Okay, I'll get to the next question in a sec. Just, I know you're not a nutritionist, but is saturated fat only from animal products?
So saturated fat really, so I know you're going to try and make the case for, for staying away from animal products. So really you're only getting saturated fat from, animal products. typically in our diet, that's where we're getting it from. So if you eliminate all animal products, you definitely have made a great stride toward getting your cholesterol lower. The problem is that animal products are part of our society, and as much as we don't want to maybe bring them into our body, our bodies are designed to deal with them pretty well, and everybody's a little bit individual, and being that our society is already constructed, it's very hard to get away from all versions of it. So I'm not a proponent of just staying away from them by eliminating anything with an animal product. I know there's a lot of people that think that may be an interesting idea, and I do think it's an interesting idea. I just don't know how sustainable it is long term, and that's what we want to be sort of promoting, things that we can do a bit effortlessly by making simple choices along the way.
Next question. And just one more point on that. Eating is a social event too, certainly with us and your friends. So it's tough to be so restrictive when you're eating. So I get that point. I'm just trying to figure out best long term. And I'm at one of those points where you're really assessing I'm really assessing everything right now. So let's get just to saturated fat. Asking a cardiologist: chicken thigh or salmon fillet, which has more saturated fat?
Which do you think?
The question I would ask is, does the chicken thigh have skin on it? All those things. But,
right.
But I'm going to say the
3 times.
The chicken thigh does.
Chicken thigh, 3 times more than the salmon. And that's, by the way, without the skin. So if you add the skin, a whole lot more. Wow. So you want to stay away from chicken thigh in deference to a chicken breast. It's a much leaner meat. Now, it doesn't mean that a chicken thigh, you're going to have it and you're going to have a heart attack. But at the same token, when you can make that simple choice, thigh or breast, go with the breast. It's leaner. Stay with that leaner. You make each one of these little things that you do are towards the Mediterranean lifestyle, which is just got to be in your subconscious. First of all, it's got to be in your conscious. You've got to learn about it, and then it goes into your subconscious. Then before you know it, your cholesterol's down and you're feeling better.
It's interesting because you do read a lot and you see a lot about people that just have that fat isn't so bad for you anymore. But you really got to be careful, I think, when it comes to the type of fat.
Right.
It's a little bit shocking to me that the chicken thigh is 3 times more than salmon, even without the skin.
Yeah.
So.
And that's where you have that old bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken, and if you're doing a bunch of thighs there with on top of it, probably coconut oil or whatever the type of oil that they're deep frying it in, and you're wondering why people were having heart attacks in their 50s while they were smoking. We've figured out that stuff, but we need to put it into our subconscious. It first has to go into the conscious. So we have to understand, hey, if I have the 2 choices, let me go with the leaner meat. Let me go with, the breast. Okay, great. That's one step towards understanding how to live and how to get our body to be used to sort of the better ingredients that are out there. And that's the goal of everything that we're doing, not only on this podcast, but as a cardiologist's life. We want to sort of transmit these little bits of information so that the choice becomes natural when you're just sitting and reaching for a piece of chicken. They're both delicious, right? So let me go for the leaner meat.
Well, no, I'm just looking at the next question here is a bison patty or a beef patty. I've never actually had bison, but which one would you think is
well, more saturated fat is the beef patty. Again, I think the crux of that is stay with the leaner meat, right? Obviously, so a bison is known as a leaner animal, and the more of the lean meat you have, the less saturated fat you're going to expose yourself to.
This next one's interesting: beef sirloin or 2% milk.
Huh. So 2% milk is always got more saturated fat than even meat. The idea of having the lower percentages of fat in your milk, at least from a saturated fat perspective, is better. Now, milk can be important. You got vitamin A, vitamin D, obviously calcium, but you want to watch the saturated fat certainly in whole milk and even in 2% milk.
Cheese, pizza, or potato chips? Now
Yes,
you're getting to
sir.
my diet.
Yeah. Well, so we're talking about saturated fat here. So cheese, saturated fat, they go sort of together. The other thing is, when do you just have one sort of slice of pizza? You usually have lots of it, and there's lots of cheese on that. So in that case, the same amount of gram slice of pizza versus similar, handful of potato chips, you're going to get more saturated fat from the pizza. But the type of chips will make a difference here, and obviously type of oil that are in the chips make a difference. But pizza itself, with all that cheese, has a lot of saturated fat.
Okay, you brought this up earlier with the Krispy Kreme. A glazed donut or an avocado?
Well, listen, the donut, of course, is going to have more saturated fat. It also got a lot of sugar, and you get that spike of sugar that makes you hungrier and is bad for your health in so many reasons. So that intense amount of sugar at one time, the body doesn't know how to deal with it. It's just frankly toxic. The avocado does have a good amount of both fat, saturated and otherwise, but it also has vitamins and minerals, and it comes in a sort of an absorption that takes a while. So it's a great tool. It's a great method of fat. It has a little bit of saturated fat, so you want to just not overdo your guacamole either. Not to mention it can be calorie rich. So great fruit, avocado, but does have some saturated fat.
Now, when they refer to avocado having good fat, they're not referring to the saturated fat in an avocado, or is that something another type of fat?
There are more than one types of fat in an avocado. The amount of fat in a particular avocado, first of all, there are almost 4 grams of fat in a whole avocado. I don't know how frequently people are eating a whole avocado, but that's, goes along with the amount that you want to get in a typical diet, which is, 5, 6, 7% of saturated fat. So it comes with a lot of other health benefits.
So you got the macadamia nuts or a pork tenderloin.
Macadamia nuts are rough in terms of their fat content in general and the saturated fat that goes with it. So you got to be careful with the type of nuts. I'm a big fan of almonds, a little bit, better for you in the sense that it's less fat content, certainly less saturated fat is something that you're watching. You want to avoid the macadamia nut in particular.
Bacon or coleslaw?
Bacon or coleslaw. So if your coleslaw is made with the heavy mayonnaise, which is traditional, the creamy mayonnaise, it's usually more fat in it than bacon, if you can imagine. Mayonnaise is rough. It is basically saturated fat. And so you may not know that. You think you're having a salad with your bacon. It's not really the case. You're having saturated fat with some minor amount of fiber in the cabbage, I guess.
Cafe latte or French fries?
Cafe latte or French fries? First of all, for me, that's what I call breakfast. No, it's I love coffee, as you know, and we'll start talking about a bit of coffee next. But a small order of French fries has saturated fat in it for sure. The cafe latte with the deep milk in it, and they usually come big, it can be as high as a 16-ounce size, has a lot more saturated fat in it. So I know that when I order coffee, I try and, have my coffee black. Adding sugar, you're spiking yourself a little bit, so meaning you're sending out the insulin and you're going to be hungrier and want more, and that whole paradigm of sugar. So I like my coffee as black as I can get it. If I'm going to have a cream in it, I'm going to try and go with a low-fat solution, and a really good option can be almond milk. That's what I usually do at the Starbucks. If I get an almond milk, and if you don't have a nut allergy, if you like the taste, but skim milk, almond milk are great substitutes for the usual cafe latte with the that deep and a lot of milk in it. You want to go to? There was a couple of people had asked me a lot about coffee lately. There's a lot of stuff in the news about coffee. What are your thoughts on coffee, Richie? Do you like coffee?
I have coffee. I have a cup very rarely. It was funny because I've always thought there was a negative kind of connotation associated with becoming kind of addicted to coffee. I think a few years ago they came out with the like that bulletproof coffee or whatever it was. So I tried that for a little while, but I don't necessarily love the taste, so I don't have it. But as a cardiologist, what are your thoughts on it? Is there
first of all, it's a fact, right? So 3/4 of the population, 75%, I think I read, drink coffee. Mm-hmm. So whether I like it or not, I got to know about it. I happen to love it, and I happen to think that we almost I don't know why, but it seems to be like part of us as humans. In that 3/4 of us drink it, that it seems to have no real negative effects that we've found out. In fact, some people say it's beneficial for you.
What do you love about it? You love that it wakes you up. You love the taste of it.
All of those things. I love the way it smells, tastes. I love the fact that it gives, the caffeine does make you, feel maybe a little bit more energetic. I love the feel of the, something sort of sipping hot. But the science behind it, hasn't scared me through the years. So I've had no problem with continuing to, to add it to our, to my personal life. But I have to be careful because people ask me about it all the time. So do you want to go about let's do this quiz they have on WebMD.
Okay. All right. About how many cups of coffee does the average person drink daily?
What are the choices?
1, 3, or 5?
I'm going to go with 3. Well, it was one correct. Seemed too small, 5 seemed a lot, but the answer is 3.
The answer is 3. Mm-hmm.
It's not a surprise to me. It's about what I have a day. So I think if there was 75% of the population having 3 cups of coffee and there was an ill effect, we would probably know it. I'm not saying that everybody's an individual, and there can be some people that don't tolerate it and you don't happen to like it, but most people do drink it, and it's not something we should be fearful of.
I know it's not bad for you. Is there a health benefit to it that you would recommend to, I don't know, somebody that's having trouble getting up or
No.
No?
Not that I know of.
No. Okay. Which has less caffeine? First of all, ground coffee or instant coffee?
So, the idea that this is I have a great story for this. I was at a very fancy home one day, and someone came and gave us a cup of coffee. It was in some, terrific sort of china, whatever else. I was sipping. Oh boy, these people, they just, they really know what they're doing. This coffee is amazing. And I went to the butler. It was a, very wealthy family. I went to tell me the secret. I love my coffee. What is it? And they're like, this is just Nescafe. You take 2 spoons, put some hot water, and that was it. There wasn't some special brewing device. It wasn't brought in on a magic carpet from Indonesia. It was just basic instant coffee. So then I was like, well, I don't know, is there more or less caffeine? It turns out that instant coffee might have a little, more caffeine in it. So I can tell you that that's been my coffee of choice. Right or wrong, I'm not sure of the answer to your question, because it depends on the instant coffee. What does WebMD say about this?
It says instant coffee has less caffeine.
Less caffeine.
Yep.
All right. It probably depends on the instant coffee, but it kind of makes sense.
Where did coffee first come from? 3 choices.
Africa.
South and South. Okay.
Yeah, definitely Africa. That's just something I've known for a while, because people associate it with sort of South America and Juan Valdez and everything, but it originated in Africa.
Yep, you're right. Mainly Ethiopia, it said. Coffee plants are related. Coffee plants are related to roses, gardenias, or berries.
I happen to know this one also because gardenias are my favorite plant. We have a huge, you've been to the house, this big gardenia bush in the front of the house. It's so aromatic, and maybe that's part of my coffee enjoyment, but I believe they're related to the gardenia family. And that's why I think maybe there's something that triggers the smell of coffee that I really like.
Yep, you're right. Gardenias. So we're getting to maybe a health benefit or not. Drinking coffee may lower your chance of, it gives you three choices here: gallstones, type 2 diabetes, or both.
I know for sure diabetes. I suspect gallstones because they've got that caffeine, which helps you to contract, which may help. So I'm going to go with both.
You're right.
But you asked me the question: does coffee have health? Is coffee good for you? But coffee can also be bad for you, right? So it can cause the excess caffeine, cause some tachycardia, maybe even increase blood pressure. So I don't want coffee to be used as a medicine. I want it to be used personally. We talk about a lot of these things that are used for groups, and then what's used personally. So I'm very hesitant to say something is good for you. What's good for you? Don't walk in front of a bus, right? But outside of that, there's a lot of subtleties in the individual. And we know for a fact that smoking most of the time is really bad for you. But it has to rise to that level for me to say, do this, you will be better.
I wonder what the physiology behind helping with gallstones.
That's a good question. We should ask one of our GI experts that we have coming up.
A grande coffee has as much caffeine as how many cans of cola? 1, 3, 5, or 7?
I'm going to go with the maximum because the grandes are supersized. So whatever they said, would you say the maximum was?
7.
7?
Yeah, so the grande has 330 milligrams of caffeine. And compare that with 42 milligrams in a can of diet cola, it
right.
says here.
Well, that comes from a coffee drinker, right? I know if I finish a grande versus if I need a bunch of cups of coffee, cups of Diet Coke or whatever that I might sometimes drink. So yeah, it makes sense.
I guess the difference is even if you're having that coffee, if you have it black, you don't have all the other crap that's in a soda.
Right.
So, what's the best place to store your coffee beans or ground coffee? Freezer, refrigerator, or counter?
I store them on the counter, so I'm hopefully it's the right place. I don't know. I just do because you buy them off the counter, right?
A dark, cool place in the counter.
Okay.
Glass or ceramic. Okay. Next question. Okay. What's the best way to protect your teeth from the acid in coffee? Brush right afterwards. Use a straw. Rinse your mouth with tap water.
I'm gonna go with the sort of tap water rinse. Because obviously using a straw is probably unrealistic. Brushing right after drinking probably isn't a bad choice, but unrealistic. I'm going with the mouth rinse.
No, you're right, but it's kind of interesting what they say here. If you brush your teeth right after drinking coffee, you could hurt sensitive surfaces. Better to rinse your mouth with tap water and wait half an hour to brush. Okay, here's a health benefit, possibly. Coffee has more antioxidants than fruits and vegetables. True or false?
I would say true because it's condensed. But if you were to say fruits and vegetables in a smoothie, I'd probably say false.
Yes, it's true. Many people get more antioxidants from coffee than in any other source. And decaf coffee never has caffeine. True or false?
I can tell you for sure that's false. Sometimes I wonder if they're giving me the decaf coffee. You got to be careful of that when you order it. I almost always assume it has a bit of caffeine in it. I feel it.